Savage.
He wants you back, Dex. He's calling you back for the state of Florida, my guy.
Yeah, the sanity's coming back this way, and it's safe for kids. I got 3 kids in school. And,
Real talk, no filter on Savaged Unfiltered. Savaged.
I do want to say thank you very much. Thank you very much to set of some sponsors here. I know my words. I got to get there. The coffee hasn't sunk in. It's only 11:30 in the morning here, but I do want to say thank you to Progressive Insurance. That's right, guys. If you're viewing us here on Rumble or X or Vimeo, better insurance starts with Progressive. Do you know that out of 4 out of 5 new consumers recommend Progressive? It is like, I think it's great. I went from Allstate to Progressive myself, and I've noticed some awesome policy changes with this company from where they were to where they are now. And I love how the commercials, they insert, right, Jakey? They insert Flo, right? She's just about everywhere with that. And they're fast. Their customer service is extremely, extremely fast. I was very, very impressed by a recent accident that I had encountered here in Florida. That's right, guys. I live in Florida, and you know how the drivers are here in the state of Florida. A little rear-ended, and I was on the phone, and boom, they answered. They're like, "Everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, everything's fine." Yeah. Wow. I was surprised. I thought I was going to be on the phone for like about, 35, 45 minutes. But yeah, snap of a finger. They're great, guys. Scan this QR code on your screen today, and you're going to understand why you feel the same way I feel. With Progressive Insurance, it's just right. Back to the show, guys. I have a guest here joining us. Goes by the name of Mark Alsip, if I'm pronouncing it. I'm sorry, Mark, if I butchered your name, buddy. You're going to have to help me out there because I'm terrible with the names sometimes, the pronunciation. And yeah, guys, I was absent when it came to that part of the classroom in grammar school. So we have an interesting guest. And what I mean by interesting, guys, I'm going to give you a little introduction to who this gentleman is. Now, I see here that he was actually indoctrinated to religion at the age of 6. Now, when you say indoctrinated, it can be many, many things, okay? And we're going to find that out from our guest here on the show. But something great about that, because there is a positive towards this, he broke free thanks to science. So I guess the science part, guys, kind of woke him up a little bit, or woke him up to looking at it as a whole. Or I'm going to get Mark's insights and aspects on it, because I always believe it comes great from the guests themselves, because, hey, it's their story, it's their journey, it's everything that makes them of who they are. So without further ado, guys, I want to bring Mark into the mix. Welcome, Mark. Welcome to Savage Unfiltered. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I'm sorry. See, I sometimes it's known I cut people off by accident.
That's okay.
I want to learn a little bit about this indoctrination, right? Because it's right on your main bio there, just about everywhere you're advertised with, podcast guest and matchmaker.fm. Yeah. So what is this whole indoctrination, and how did you get indoctrinated to begin with? Let's start there, if you don't mind.
The very short answer to that is that my church threatened me with burning in hell forever if I disagreed with anything they said. And a lot of stuff they said went against science. There's a sect out there called Young Earth Creationism that believes the Earth is only 6,000 years old. Humans walk with dinosaurs. They're evolution deniers, science deniers. They believe the Bible has to be interpreted literally. Every single verse is literal. So the Earth was really created in 6 days. And as a child, I loved science, but I also loved God. When I came in with science contradictions to what the church was teaching, they would tell me outright, "You're going to burn in hell. This is Satan talking to you," through the science class. If threatening a child 6 years old with hell is not indoctrination, I don't know what is. So Yes,
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Yeah, I see that right there where you're literally fighting, because of the
Yes.
science, I guess, that came into it, afterwards. Did that actually? I want to go back before I, jump ahead of myself. What around that age of 6 years old, when you kind of like learned the science behind that, um, who taught that to you? Because that's interesting. Was it maybe a family member, or were you listening to more of the church crowd, or how did that come into play?
Well, I had input from two sources. One was the church, one was science. I began, I think I was around 6 or 7, with a secular school. A teacher brought in a little prism and made a rainbow on the wall. And he explained the physics behind prisms and light. And that's how we got rainbows. And very shortly thereafter, I went to Sunday school, and the teacher told us rainbows didn't exist until after Noah's flood, that was God's promise. He wasn't going to drown all these innocent babies and children again. And I raised my hand and said, no, wait a minute. Rainbows have always existed. Here's why. And started giving a physics lesson in Sunday school. And she stopped me, and she was very angry. She told the class that Satan was speaking through Mark, and that Mark was going to burn in hell if he didn't give up these views. And this went on for over a decade, where I would go to church and say something that I've learned in secular school or learned on my own, and I was threatened that I was going to burn for it. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, it's not a good thing. I mean, and I mean, you're bringing up some points here that we see a lot here in society, right? With the separation of church and state, and I want to go into that with you, because I mean that's kind of coming in right into play, right? It's going into our next little segue. But before we go into that, now you mentioned rainbows, right? And you mentioned pride behind that. Are you referring to, some of the pride type of what you see today with the LGBT, or was that brought up in church at all, or is that entirely different?
Interesting question. So my church did teach that being LGBTQ, we didn't even call it back then. They actually used some very derogatory names I'm not going to say on the air, but we were taught that was sinful and you were going to burn in hell for that. But in my particular case, this rainbow story didn't have anything to do with the LGBTQ movement. I don't know if rainbows were particularly widely recognized as a symbol of it back then. But again, in my church, I was taught that this was a sin. Being gay, being trans was a sin. And it's very interesting. Just to give your audience kind of a trigger warning, a lot of people right now are accusing transgender people or cross-dressers as being pedophiles. And I know a lot of people like that, and they're not pedophiles. And the reason I bring it up in the book is that I was sexually abused as a child, and it was not a trans person. It wasn't a drag queen. It was a white, straight Christian male, went to church every Sunday, well-respected in his community. And yet nobody would ever believe that this person was a pedophile because he hides behind religion. So the problem is you've got religion out there accusing people who aren't guilty of things, and then the religious people are doing exactly what they say is sinful, and we've got to stop doing that.
But what I'm trying to say is it's unfortunate, Mark, that you see that, in today's society with the whole movement of indoctrination, right? I mean, back then, we didn't have issues back then where it was constantly ridiculed of what you see now, right? Everyone respected one another. Yes, there was some ousting of certain individuals, and the gay and the LGBTQ communities back then felt like they were being silenced and stuff like that. But I think times were a little different back then, of what I kind of learned and from grandparents and stuff. It was just a lot different. I mean, you can't bash it because the times were different, just like the times are different now. But I mean, you have to learn from the past to make a great future, right? I mean, more or less. I mean, you have to understand what went wrong back then to create better rights now. So you don't condemn to repeat the same mess that possibly was back then, right? I mean, I think we both can agree on that. But let's go a little bit more into this fighting for separation of church and state. Do you think that's becoming more of an issue now? I see that you put state in there, with the church, because we see that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So there is a very big problem between the separation of church and state. We are falling back to times that they really have the fundamentalism. It really has been around for all 60 years of my life. But we did have a little bit of separation of church and state. Prayer in public school was outlawed just before I started school. And that's creeping back in now. We actually have public employees like teachers or coaches conducting prayers, on the public's dime, on football fields or in classrooms. We see people trying to teach this false doctrine it's called intelligent design, which is a religious-based pseudoscience in classrooms. And we have a lot of things, just traditional fundamentalism taught that slavery was actually
Michael Savage on Spotify.
I was actually taught this, and I had a history teacher who told me that nobody would ever treat a slave badly because they paid too much for them. And the segue to modern times is in schools now, they are preventing teachers from talking about race problems and how racial tension originated in this country, which was slavery. And teachers aren't allowed to even talk about it. In Florida, for example, the governor down there just did an executive order where they have to teach in schools in Florida, where you're at, that slavery taught a good trade to people. If you're going to be that bigoted, that's fine, I guess, in your own home, but don't come to to school and teach it. And just to wrap this up, in Kentucky right now, we have on the ballot for November a constitutional amendment that will overturn part of our Constitution that prohibits taxpayer-funded private religious schools. And if this goes in, all the schools out there, I'm going to be forced to pay through my tax dollars to teach children falsehoods like the earth being 6,000 years old or humans walking with dinosaurs. That's just preposterous. It's wrong. But they're going to force me to pay for it. And then, of course, we have the Roe v. Wade being overturned. That's a religious thing. Maybe we shouldn't be making decisions in government based on religious beliefs, regardless of what your beliefs on abortion are. The people arguing against it right now are making a religious argument. So
I mean, it's a tough pill to swallow. I mean, if you want to look at it like that, I mean, you bring up some good points with the abortion and Roe v. Wade. I mean, all that is very, 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 very hard to digest. With a lot of different views and opinions with other people that may look at that very strongly. Guys, what you're listening to is the voice or the video image, depending on what platform you're listening to us on, of Mark Alsip. And we're getting into right now the fighting for the separation of church and state, because you're seeing that all over the board, especially social media and some media outlets covering it from time to time. Guys, before we jump in a little bit more with Mark here on these issues, I want to say thank you to Monkey Colt Coffee Company. That's right, guys. Boozy coffee is just better. Use this promo code SAVAGED. You're going to get 10% off your order with Monkey Colt Coffee Company. Started with a dream from a young entrepreneur of Mark Zions, the CEO of the company, located right here in the state of Florida, guys. That's right. He's right on the West Coast, right in the Tampa Bay area. So give him a big shout out. Mark Zions over there of Monkey Colt Coffee Company. I don't know anybody, right, Shaky? I don't know anybody that infuses coffee with alcohol and liquor. I was blown away when I was talking to him. You guys got to check that out on the Savage Unfiltered Library. Had a really, really awesome time with Mark there, discussing some about his coffee and his products and how they're tied so nicely with cigars, right? Some people here in Florida, including Georgia. I mean, he's in Georgia. We were told he's in parts of South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, the whole Southern Belt. really are, kind of backing them with the Monkey Colt Coffee Company. It has a little catchy name, right? Monkey Colt. I was like, hey, Mark, not Mark. Now I'm thinking I'm talking to Mark. Matt, excuse me. I was like, Matt, I'm like, what the hell made you come up with this design and this name? And he's like, it just came to me. So check them out today, guys. Scan the QR code. Grab yourself some Monkey Colt Coffee Company products and use the code SAVAGE, and you're really going to be impressed.
That's my delusion. But more and more, my cousins are Republicans, so I trailblazed the way.
Yeah.
Push.
Shut up for a minute, Joe. With all due respect, I got to say that because he'll continue. Dex, you're probably laughing like, where the hell did you meet this guy from? I met him actually going on 2 years ago digitally. We never really, really properly introduced ourselves in person, but he's been a great asset to the show here, knowing him for now 2 years. He's been on countless of episodes here on Savage Unfiltered, including some of our X Spaces, which we do have in the bottom here with the graphic. Savage Underground every Saturday night at 9:30 Eastern. Scan the QR code. You'll go right to my main site there on X. He wants you back, Dex. He's calling you back for the state of Florida, my guy.
Yeah, the sanity's coming back this way, man. And it's safer for kids. I got 3 kids in school. And I know what Nathan's talking about a little bit about parental involvement, and you try a lot to be involved in the situation. But you can't just impromptu visit schools anymore. Did you know that? You can't just impromptu visit your school and just
back to the show. So I want to get more into this church and state with you, Mark. I also want to get into some of what you just mentioned before we took a quick break with the abortion, with the Roe v. Wade. Because we're seeing that all over, right? We're seeing a lot of heat. Yeah. We're seeing a lot of backlash from it. Why do you think people are kind of, I don't want to say rebelling against it, but bringing it up and fighting for abortion rights? Mainly, let's start with the abortion rights. Some people are trying to fight for abortion rights, and some people are fighting against abortion rights, thinking that it could be possibly murder, okay? And those aspects. Let's go to that if you don't mind. Let's start with the people that are fighting for abortion rights. I want to start with that, and then I want to kind of go into the other aspect. Why do you think that is? Go ahead.
Well, so when I entered college, I went back to college actually after graduating in computer science, and was a pre-med student. And I entered that phase of school believing that abortion was murder. And then I started taking lessons in biology, physiology, anatomy, medical ethics. And I learned that it wasn't the clear-cut story that my church told me it was. To say that a fertilized egg is a human being is not, a person is not really scientifically accurate. And I learned a lot of cases where women were raped, women were dying, they were in danger because of an unviable pregnancy. And those were the people who were really going out and seeking abortions. It wasn't the slander that my church was telling me that, hey, this is someone who is just trying to be lazy.
Savage
birth control.
In Pennsylvania. Let me ask you a question about abortion. What would you do to further restrict women's access to abortions as president?
Well, look. I know where you're going, and I just want to say, a question was asked to me. And it was asked in a very hypothetical, and it was said illegal. I've been told by some people that was a older line answer, and that was an answer that was given on a basis of an older line from years ago, on a very conservative basis. But
your original answer, you mean?
My original, but I was asked as a hypothetically. The laws are set now on abortion, and that's the way they're going to remain until they're changed.
Because you had said you wanted, you told Bloomberg in January that you believed abortion should be banned at some point in pregnancy. Where would you?
Well, first of all, I would have liked to have seen, this be a states' rights. I would have preferred states' rights. I think it would have been better if it were up to the states. But right now the laws are set, and that's the way the laws are.
But do you have a feeling how they should change? There are a lot of laws you want to change. You've talked about them on everything from libel to torture. Anything you'd want to change on abortion? At this moment,
the laws are set. And
there are a lot of misconceptions. A lot of people, the 6-week heartbeat bill, for example, a lot of people who haven't gone to school don't realize that an embryo does not produce a heartbeat at 6 weeks. The heart hasn't developed yet, and yet we have. Yes, it's true. That's true.
You see me with my eyes raised, my eyebrows raised after that one, because
that raises,
you just brought something up. I hate to chime in, but you said that.
No, go ahead.
I have to ask this for some of my listeners that are probably puzzled by that statement that you just made, that a heartbeat is not detected at 6 weeks. Do you have medical proof that it's not detected at 6 weeks at all, or?
Absolutely, yes. If you go to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecology, they explain this very clearly. At 6 weeks, what you have is a transducer, a Doppler ultrasound machine that produces a sound wave, and the sound wave passes into the woman's body and is reflected back, and the difference, the Doppler shift, you hear a train go by, the change in frequency. The change in frequency of that artificially created sound is what you hear at 6 weeks. So the ACOG, as I call them, are trying to get doctors to use more correct, precise terminology when they talk about things like a heartbeat. If you unplug the power on that machine, right? If you unplug the power, take the batteries out, you will hear nothing. Take a stethoscope, put it to the womb, you will hear nothing. What we associate, a heartbeat, lub-dub, lub-dub, those chambers, that hasn't developed yet. But yeah, the reason I'm bringing this up is that there are heartbeat laws at 6 weeks, right? These laws were based on the misconception that you have a fully formed person with a fully formed heart. And yeah, this is scientifically accurate. I do ask anybody who disagrees, please double check me.
Yeah. Here's my question. So if you feel that the heartbeat or through the study that you're mentioning is not detected at 6 weeks, when does the heart actually come into play in the process of the pregnancy?
Well, it is always in development. You could argue from the time that stem cells, which are cells that they become any type of tissue, any type of organ, they go through this process called differentiation, and they start becoming a heart. So at 6 weeks, there's a little tube. At 10 weeks, the tube is folding back on itself. At some point, you do get what we would recognize as a heart. But the point I'm trying to make is not that certainly a heart is developing, but there's this very emotional kind of religious belief that, at 6 weeks, you're really hearing this beating heart. And that's technically, that's not correct.
So if you're not hearing the heart, okay, because this is important to ask, because people are going to be puzzled by some of what you're mentioning. With all due respect, they are. They're going to be like puzzled. They're going to be like questioning you, like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Of course, it's detected in 6 weeks. But if you're not hearing the heart, what are you hearing then? Frequency levels?
Okay.
Or?
Yeah, sure. So what you're hearing is the ultrasound machine that's being used in the doctor's office creates this sound, right? The sound is at a frequency above human hearing. But the machine creates the sound. The sound passes into the body, reflects back off the body, and the difference, the frequency shift in the sound the machine put out is calculated, and a sound is artificially created. A sound is created based on the difference in the signal. The waves going in, the waves coming out, they change frequency. Just as, like I said, a train going by you on a track sounds deeper. And
Michael Gardner, uncut, raw, and savage.
You can get imagery from it. You can create sounds from it. But the point is, the organ itself is not produced, the heart or the developing heart is not making that sound. The sound is being produced by the Doppler machine.
Well, let's talk about before Doppler machines and everything, because this is interesting. I want to go back before, ultrasound machines were invented and other type of technology that was actually introduced to the medical field and hospitals and everything. Let's go back to like early 1900s, 1800s. Shit, we'll go back to when biblical times, in Israel. We didn't have these machines, Mark, and sure. So if you're stating something that could be possibly accurate, what were the frequency levels back then? If you have some type of understanding back then, because they were hearing things too, like the mother was experiencing things. Not necessarily meaning that she could detect the baby's heartbeat then, or detect that at that process. So none of that stuff existed. So, you can't say that there was frequency or radiation or any type of movements back then, because none of that was around. So what were they experiencing back then? Because that's interesting, because when you bring up stuff like this, Mark, people are going to counter argument the statement and say, well, if you're saying that, what was it back then? It was obviously different, right?
Oh yeah, obviously. I don't know what year Doppler ultrasound was invented, but obviously, as you said, if you go back far enough in time, that technology did not exist. So that technology was not used. Nobody went in and started probing with an ultrasound at 6 weeks to try to determine a pregnancy. They didn't have that technology available. That they used whatever technology they had at the time, or whatever methods they had at the time. Obviously, there are changes that take place in a woman's body when she becomes pregnant, and at some point, in most cases, some people go through pregnancy and don't realize they're pregnant, but that's really rare. The woman's period will stop. At some point, the woman will start experiencing morning sickness. The woman will start seeing, visibly at some point, a growth. So the point is, back then they did not have this technology, so they couldn't go and say at 6 weeks, oh, you're pregnant. Because most women, if you listen to what doctors say, I'm not a doctor, okay?
Right.
I listen to what doctors say, and the doctors will tell you most women at 6 weeks don't even realize they're pregnant because the pregnancy hasn't developed that far. So,
I want to get...
go ahead.
I want to get more into your book, because, ladies and gentlemen, Mark has a book out called Journey to Reason. It's one of his new books. I highly suggest you check that out. We're going to get into the book in a moment, guys, but I got to get a quick break in for everyone that tunes into iHeartRadio, guys. They have an Evolution Radio event coming up. We'll put the QR code in here. Thank you very much, Shaky. Producer Shaky putting this in. Listen to Evolution Radio on iHeart for your chance to win a trip to the event. Scan it, the QR code, guys. All the information will be listed there. Many great things coming out of iHeart. I always say that, Shaky. A lot of great stuff coming out of iHeart. I love it. They have their big music festival down in South Florida every year, which I try to get down there, but with my line of work, it's so difficult. It really is difficult. Guys, check out some of our merchandise. That's right, we got a merchandise website. What time is it? It's Savage time. I made a joke with my co-host here that's not on the program today. He's got other things. So Joe is actually on a little mini vacation. So hope to have Joe back on within about a week, we're told. Right, Shaky? About a week. We made a joke between both of us of, me constantly sometimes running late, because I do run late from time to time on the show, like a minute, 2 minutes. That's late to Joe. To me, it's like, shit happened. I'm fucking running into traffic or, whatever. And Joe was like, are you wanting regular time, Savage, or are you wanting Savage time? Because I'm like, well, I'd rather have Savage time because I can come in when I want, because it's my show. But he's like, well, thank you for letting me stay in the green room and just waiting for you to decide when to walk into the studio. So grab the merchandise, guys, because I do have to give a hat tip to Joseph M. Leonard, which is the co-host here, Jokester Joe, we call him, for coming up with this design and concept. And it is available on SavagedArmy.com. Right on the top there, mostly all our new merchandise is listed right on the top. So you're going to want to check that out because it's a great little mug. You know, your team, you know, Shaky with, you know, Beth and some of the people behind the graphic design here on the show when it goes into production mode. I'm blown away. I really am blown away by it. But back to the show, guys. I want to get into a little bit of this book, Mark. Journey to Reason. First of all, how did you come up with the title Journey to Reason? Let's start there.
Sure. Yeah. So, as I said, I started out as an indoctrinated child, and over the course of several decades, I was on this journey, learning more things about science, learning more things about religion, and suffered a lot of trauma because of the conflicts between the two. But it was very much a journey. Every stop along this journey was, you know, an episode in school in a science class, maybe some conflict in church. In the end of the book, reason wins out. I decided that I just did not believe in gods at all. It's not an anti-religious book. I have a lot of good Christian role models in my life, Jewish role models, Muslim role models, but the fundamentalism, I walked away from that. That is the subtitle of the book, Walking Away from Religious Fundamentalism and Young Earth Creationism. At the end of the journey, I just put all the evidence together and said, hey, what I'm being taught by the fundamentalists doesn't make sense. And because it's kind of creeping into our country now, it was time to speak out. So
yeah. I see a lot of it covered in your book. You know, I'm looking at it right now with society differences, culture differences. I noticed that you reference a little bit of science denial, the vaccines, the COVID vaccines, right? That seems to be it. And anti-LGBTQ laws, book bans, racism. I mean, everything's in this book, guys. It's to me, it seems more of an educational book rather than a, you know, throw it at your face. You know, they're wrong. Those conservatives are wrong. The MAGA's wrong. You know, I mean, that's what you see now. You know, like everybody wants to put
Savaged with Michael Gardner on Spotify.
Mark, because I believe getting the aspect and the backlot story of my guest on here, you know, before I make assumptions and accusations and all that, because I'm not that type of radio host or talk radio host or podcaster. I consider myself a shotcaster in some aspects, but what I mean by that, the whole shotcasting, is sometimes you have to ask questions, deep dive questions. So let's start with some of the fundamental issues that are in this book. I want to start with your insights on vaccines, because that seems to be driven very, very high in the presence, mainly on a lot of social media platforms, including Twitter or now X. What's your views on the whole vaccines? Because we hear that, Mark, with, you know, my body, my choice, but then it goes back to the abortion. Well, it's okay for women to enact into abortion, but it's not okay for the vaccines. Like, what's your views on that? Are you supportive of that, or like, what's your views?
I'm very pro-vaccine, having been a pre-med student and learning what vaccines actually do, right? I know what vaccines actually do. And if you're getting your information from a YouTube channel or Facebook, you're probably not getting the most accurate information on them. All they do is help your body kind of build a fence and an immune reaction before you actually get the disease that they protect against, because the disease, even COVID, is worse than any side effects from the vaccine for most people. Of course, all medicines have some side effects, but I'm very pro-vaccine. My mother went through the polio scare back in the 40s, and she had classmates or friends who spent the rest of their lives in iron lungs. So I know people, there's this kind of burned in our cultural memory of vaccines helping. And all of a sudden, recently, we've become so anti-science in this country. And when I get in vaccine debates with people, they don't even know what the vaccine's really doing. So, that's, did I answer the question, or was there?
Yeah. I mean, you answered the question to somewhat of a degree, but the reason why I brought up vaccines is because it looks like it's covered in your book, and I haven't read your book just yet. I haven't decided to pick it up just yet, but I wanted to ask that question before maybe I do want to take a gather into the book. Because that seems to be a heated discussion with the vaccines, including some of the book bans, like why people are wanting to ban books and this and that. Let's get away from the whole COVID, because I think it's just nonsense. And I can go into that whole COVID hysteria with you, Mark, but that's on another episode. I want to mainly stick on some of why you believe some of the aspects of your backlot story here with the Journey to Reason, your book, and some of this indoctrination that you're referring here on the show. Why do you feel people are indoctrinated? Like, what's your views on that? Like, why?
I think that there's a lot of insecurity. We as human beings don't really know we all know we're going to die, but we don't really know what happens after that. And I think people find comfort in religion, and that's okay to do that. But the indoctrination comes from this single-minded fundamentalist corner where, oh my gosh, this is the literal word of God, the Bible, or the Quran, or whichever religion you're in. The scripture is the literal word of a God. So we must live by that, even though these documents were written thousands of years ago by people who knew nothing of the world that we know now. Some people find comfort in that. They don't want to admit that they don't know what's going to happen at the end. People,
what do you mean they didn't know anything about the world that they know now? What do you mean by that?
Well, we didn't really understand in the time the Bible was written. Nobody really knew what a planet was. For example, they didn't know about other galaxies.
Well, of course not. I mean, we didn't have the technology through telescopes that we have now. Now we can look at a planet and say, well, that's a planet. That's not a star. We can distinguish that. With human evolution and human technology and all that, we can distinguish between a star and a planet. So that's obvious. People back then, when they were looking at something, they didn't know if they were looking at a star, a celestial object, or even a planet, let alone possibly
they noticed the planets were moving. That was the big difference, is they noticed the planets changed position. So they couldn't explain it. So they attributed religious beliefs to this, right? The planets were gods. They could be forebears of new events that might come up. People use the planets for prophecy. So they didn't know about the world. And to that point, in medicine, in the Bible, actually, they would cure disease by killing a bird, sprinkling the bird's blood on another bird, and setting that bird free. That's actually a cure. I believe it was for leprosy. In the Bible, we know a lot more about what causes diseases now, right? So that's what I mean when we know more about, when the people wrote the Bible, they had a very limited view of the world and of science and technology. So we've learned a lot. Why are we insisting? Why do some people insist on living like we're, back in the Bronze Age? I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I mean, but you're making up some good points here on the show. It conflicts, with what we're seeing today. There's conflicts on both sides of the aisle. There's conflicts on people that are challenging issues that we're referring to on the show, and there's people that are counter arguing the same issue, right? But hold on, let me rephrase that. I don't think that they're counter-arguing the question behind some of the motives that you're referring to. I think they're questioning it, but they're questioning it on an educational purpose. Because I see that a lot, what you're talking about here on the show. I see a lot of mainly conservatives and, the MAGA people that are, here in the country that are questioning everything about abortion and Roe v. Wade and LGBTQ rights and all that, book bans. They're questioning it and they're understanding, or they want to understand, they want to understand why people feel the way they feel against this. And every time they go to bring that up on an educational purpose, those people are getting attacked by the other side. by mainly sometimes LGBTQ. Now, I don't have anything against LGBTQ. What I do have against, Mark, is the radicalization from the LGBTQ, because you do have some friendly people on that side, and you have radical people on that side that do want to cause harm and mayhem and chaos. And don't get me wrong, you have some people on the right and, mainly people in the middle that present the same thing. So how do we kind of go around that that scenario, right? How do we become one people on this planet that can understand it without being so triggered? Because triggerness it's a lot. It really is.
Everything that you say now is going to upset somebody, right? I mean, I agree with you. You're right. Everyone is we're so polarized that we can't sit down and have discussions. We can't have an honest discussion about just about any topic, any of the topics in my book that we've talked about here. People are so dug in on both sides that they won't come together and talk things out. Now, you're right. There are some people on the conservative side or the liberal side who are very radical. That's very obvious. Should be obvious to and I think maybe we give too much attention to them. That
you think it's an attention thing? Like
I think the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? I could you pick a politician, Marjorie Taylor Greene is
any other
infamous now or famous or well known just because she's deliberately.
I'd like to know if any of the Democrats
controversial.
On this committee
she takes that really out there far right position. Now, like you said, there are people on the left who will also do that. But
you bring up Marjorie Taylor Greene. You don't think?
Goldman. That's right.
And I'd like to get your honesty, 100% honesty, because
I will give it to you.
About honesty, but I mean, you don't think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is pushing back against maybe some of that radicalization that we're seeing in the country today? Because you have radicalization up in Washington from a lot of politicians. I mean, you see it. I know you see it. I know you see some of the agitators and the instigators up in Washington because they're doing it all the time.
I think
trying to push back against that at all, or no?
No, I think she's trying to use people who are don't agree with her religious beliefs. She knows she has a base of fundamentalists out there. She knows she have a group of people who I would have been had I stayed in my church, and you get a lot of votes if you rile them up. I don't. She's bathroom bills. I don't know who the hell's in the bathroom with me when I go to the bathroom. I don't care. I've been, using bathrooms all my life, and yet this is a bigger emergency to her than the opioid epidemic or the wars we have going on around the world. She's spending time on attacking people over bathrooms when there are, I would say, much bigger things she should be concentrating on, because she knows it gets people riled up, right? I know I've got a lot of people riled up by saying what I'm saying.
Well, you just mentioned with the whole bathroom thing. You don't think people on the other side are trying to get that riled up too with the the cross gender bathroom? I mean, I think that's wrong. I mean, here's why I think it's wrong, because I grew up in a traditional era. Okay. And again, guys, folks, don't think I'm so savage behind my persona, but what I am savaged about is I grew up in an era where it was very traditional. Okay. A man goes into a man's bathroom and a woman goes into a woman's bathroom. What we're seeing now is it could be linked towards sexualization, high sexualization, because you have children, young children that sometimes have to go with their daddies, and they could be on the opposite sex. You have single fathers that raise daughters, right? And sometimes they have to go in the same men's room with their fathers and their daddies. And that's okay. That's acceptable, because you know why? Because that's a single father. Or maybe the parents are like traveling and, the daughter's with the father, or the son is with the mother, and they have to do that. I mean, I had to do that when I was, but what I do think that there's wrong is where there is a transgender individual that goes into the opposite sex, and there could be children in that bathroom, and the children question it because they're like a sponge, Mark. They want to know, like, daddy or mommy, like, why is this person in this bathroom? Isn't that a man or isn't that a woman? Mommy, daddy, isn't that wrong for them going in that bathroom? Why are they in that? They're questioning it. And I don't know, not for nothing, Mark, but I don't think that's appropriate. Maybe that's just me saying that.
It's okay. I wish I could come up with an example of that actually happening. I am positive that I've been in a bathroom with transgender people before, just based on, the odds, the mathematics. But I didn't know. I've never looked under the stall door to figure out what sex or what gender the other person is. So
right, but because why I'm saying it is because, I mean, if you look clearly, you can tell that that's a man presenting himself as a woman, vice versa, that's a woman trying to present herself as a man. I mean, you can clearly see that. Sometimes it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, but if you look, I mean, that's the same sex, presenting themselves as, trying to identify themselves as another sex. I mean, you can put a huge amount of makeup on somebody, but it's not going to change the aspect of the background of it. I just think it's very inappropriate. That's just me. I don't know.
I've actually been completely fooled. I've had transgender people come out and say they're transgender when, because they chose to share that information. I had no idea otherwise.
Mark,
go ahead.
I'd love to discuss this with you, but I want to bring you back on for part 2 if that's okay with you.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Yeah,
because we're getting into some discussion that I believe that needs to be addressed here, not only on this show, but in the country, to have people understand. Where can some of my listeners find you if they want to learn a little bit more about your book? Possibly just who Mark Alsip is. Please plug away. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So probably the best thing anybody could do right now, if they're interested in the message I'm bringing into the show, is go to Amazon and Google Mark Alsip, Journey to Reason, and you'll see the book. Kindle Unlimited people can download it for free, so you're not out anything by checking the book out. They can also find me at www.alsip.net. That's my last name. I do a lot of my promotion there. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I do also have a blog I've been running for about 10 years that goes more to what we talked about earlier, the science denial, the vaccine denial, the climate change denial, which we didn't get to. That's called Bad Science Debunked. And that's been around for about 10 years and has a pretty decent following. So, just look up Mark Alsip on Amazon. Please check out the book, or Bad Science Debunked if you just want to see some background on vaccines and other issues we talked about.
We're gonna get into that. What Mark just said, the reason behind all this and why it's going that way. Guys, I'm Savage here on Savage Unfiltered. Please check us back here again with part 2 with Mark Alsip here on the show. Thanks very much, and until next time, take it easy.